our previous home, we used to let the birdseed fall out of the feeder and just come up and grow, and they would get really tall, and I took a lot of photographs of them. The backside of this particular flower kind of intrigued me, and so I did a close-up of it, and actually I painted several paintings from this photo about 10 years ago, and I would love to try to do it again. So I'll use this photo for my reference. This is a painting that I did back in 2011, and I will be using this also as a reference. I went ahead and put down some even washes of sap green and gamboge nova just to save some time. I recently bought a set of QoR High Chroma watercolors in 5mm tubes, and I really like these, and I got to thinking I could actually use every one of these colors in this sunflower painting. So that's what I'm going to try to do, with the exception of just a couple other additional colors. The palette for today will be American Journey Sap Green, Holbein New Gamboge or Gamboge Nova, Schminke Cerulean Blue Hue, and then the core colors, the 6 from the High Chroma set, which will be quinacridone gold, transparent pyrrole orange, quinacridone magenta, dioxazine purple, cobalt teal, and green gold. I will be using an Arches block 140-pound cold press today, 12 by 16. And I never know exactly what brushes that I might need, so I usually just put out several flats and several rounds and go from there. Remember, the sketch will be available on the Facebook page, Paint Your Garden Watercolor, along with the reference photo and the actual finished painting. So let's get going. Now, I made a decision about the sap green. I went ahead and used American Journey Sap Green. It was a little bit greener, not quite so yellow as the Daniel Smith, but they're both great colors. I will start with the yellows, and I'm not going to wet it first. I'm going to put it down wet on dry, and then I will take maybe some orange, some pyrrole orange, and some of the quinacridone gold, and try to mix them, let them mix right on the painting. And I'll just work around from left to right. So I'm going to put another layer of gamboge and then try to incorporate some of the pyrrole orange and also maybe some of the quinacridone gold. And I'm just going to let them mix right on the paper. Just remember, you will have to skip around a little bit because you don't want one wet petal to butt up against another wet petal, because then the paint is going to mix. Along the margins of several of the petals, I also decided to put a little bit of a very light green. That's a mixture of the sap green and a little bit of the green gold. So the core paints do mix fairly well with the other brands of paint, even though they have a different binder in them. As I turn my attention to the green sepals underneath the yellow petals, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to wet the paper first. Now, just to point out that the underpainting that I did was done several days before, so it was real good and dry. And as long as I don't work the paper too much, it's not going to come up. So I wet the paper first, and then I'm going to go along the edges or the margins with cobalt teal. The main reason I wet it first was because the area is a little bit larger and it just gives me more time. I'm going to put the greens on and the cobalt teal on all at the same time, so they'll mix a little bit. The QoR paints are known for their incredible flow, so it will spread. I will demonstrate that in a minute on a separate little piece of paper, how incredible the flow is compared to some of the other brands of paints. So it does take a little bit of getting used to. And I just put on some of the sap green. I will have to skip around again, making sure that the wet edges don't touch each other. I may not extend the green paint all the way to the tips because I'm going to cover the tips with some magenta as a finishing touch later. That was a little bit of the green gold. Now as we go along, you will notice that the sepals that are closer to the petals are going to be more yellow-green than green. And the reason is the flower is facing the incoming sun and they're actually a little bit transparent. So the sun will be coming in through the petals and the sepals, and it will make them look a little bit more yellow-green, whereas the ones that are underneath or closer to the stem will be a little bit greener and darker green. I left a little band in the middle of each sepal that did not have as much color, and it's just the way it looks in the reference photo if you look at the reference photo. So I didn't put a lot of paint, and if you do, that's fine because you can lift it out later if you want to. Because I'm using the QoR paints, I know that my final result will be a little more colorful than the actual flower would be in reality, but that's fine. I would like to take just a moment and show you the incredible flow that the QoR paints have. I'm wetting the paper first, nice and wet. And this is actual speed, so you can see how fast it spreads across the little paper. Now that's the pyrrole orange. They use a synthetic binder called Aquazole, whereas the other paints that I'm using are using gum arabic for their binder, and that's a bit of the schminky cobalt blue. I'm going to do it one more time. Now that's the sap green, American Journey sap green. And this is a bit of the quinacridone magenta. So it just takes a bit of getting used to. I will use green gold more for the upper sepals because they're going to have more of a yellowish tinge to them. It is a very strong color, so I will mix it with sap green, but it will be a little bit more yellow mix than on the lower ones. At first I was going to use the Perylene green, which is a nice dark green, but I wanted it to be a little bit more vibrant, so I decided to mix sap green with the Schminky cerulean blue hue. I tested several colors and that one seemed to be the nicest one, and so I decided to get my dark greens that way. You can see that flow, how that green gold spread into the middle of the sepal. I'm using the green gold much like I did with this cobalt teal, running it along the edge and then filling in with a little bit of a greener mix. I'm using some of the cerulean blue hue mixed with the sap green to get the dark green color. I'm putting just a very dilute layer of quinacridone magenta over some of the petals just for unity and also just to bring out the color a little bit more. I just lifted a little bit because I guess it was a little too intense. Just in 3 or 4 places, that's all you really need. Now I'm going to add some more of the magenta to some of the tips of the sepals. You may have to do it a time or two to get the intensity that you want. I'm going for the 3rd layer now with a dark green. I'm trying to soften those dark green hard edges by putting another layer of cobalt teal along there while everything is still wet, and that smooths everything out. Now I decided to lift just a little bit more out of the middle of those sepals, and so I'm taking a moist brush that is a bristle brush and putting a little water on it and then dabbing it up, and some of the paint will lift off. And now it's time for the background. I plan on using mostly the dioxazine purple and then dropping in a little bit of the cobalt teal and the quinacridone magenta. I'll do those little corner spots first. For those larger areas, I will be wetting the paper first with a good bit of water. I will first need to take care of those close spaces with a smaller brush. Sometimes I really like to use those small shader brushes because you can really get into the tight spaces by turning the brush sideways and get into those tight areas. Boy, you can really see that magenta spread on that wet paper. You'll notice on the reference photo there's a lot of fuzz on the stems and on some of those sepals, and if you want to, you can put that on there. I would probably use a white pastel pencil, or you can scrape it out a little bit, but I probably won't do too much on it. I just wanted to show you that that is an option. The white pastel pencil is probably your best bet. Now, I guess I'm done with this one, so we'll remove the tape. I would like to thank you so much for watching. And please don't forget to subscribe and like, and I will see you next time.